Good evening, YouTube family. T.O. here with Simplistic Fishing. Hey, tonight we're going to start a 5-part video series for Lake Lewisville. Had a lot of requests for this one, so it's time to jump into it. We're going to start off with the Google waypoints. I'm going to break this down into 3 different zones. So we'll have zones 1, 2, and 3. I'll break those down for you here in just a second. And then we'll sweep back behind those Google waypoints and we'll talk about the Navionics side, different offshore spots to look at and to maybe consider next time you're out there fishing Lake Lewisville. So don't forget, if you haven't bought the cards for your waypoints on all these other lakes, you can find them at simplisticfish.square.site. And for those of you who have purchased a card, thank you very much. Truly appreciate the business and hope it's working out well for you. If you have any problems with it, just let me know. Hey, without any further ado, let's jump into this thing. Google waypoints for Lake Lewisville. Let's get going. All right, so as I mentioned in the introduction, we're going to break this down into 3 different zones. So tonight we're looking at zone 1. So that's going to be on this side of the lake. This is more the west side of the lake or the Hickory Creek arm. And then when we move out to our second video, we're going to talk about zone 2. So that's going to be over here on the east side. So pretty much all of this area over here and up on the northern side. And then on the last and final video, we'll break it down into zone 3, which is going to be on this side. So if I take out zone 1 and zone 2, you can now see we'll work on zone 3, which doesn't have as many points as the other ones, but still a lot of good areas to go take a look at. So with all that being said, let's switch back and go back to zone 1. And then when we're looking at this, I want to just kind of point out the year that I'm using here. So I'm actually using January of 2014 on some of this stuff. You can go back to October of 2013 and the image actually changes just a little bit, not too much. But when you get into, yeah, there we go. Sorry, it wasn't moving for me. When you get back into 2013, it almost looks the same. So we're just going to keep it here at 1013, but you could also, again, move it up to 2014 or even up to 10 of 14 and still get a pretty clear image where the, where the lake has been drawn down. So I'll just leave it right here, and let's go ahead and start here on zone 1, and let's start down here by the dam. And then I'm just going to work my way up, and then we're going to work our way back down this arm, and that'll kind of finish up the video. So very first thing I noticed here, coming in from the dam, don't see too much stuff going on here. This was kind of an interesting spot down in here. Not sure what's going on there, but nothing too attractive here. Now this lake also has those things that I referenced to as stick-ups. They're all over the place. From what I understand, they're old willow bushes that started to grow when the lake was down. So those stick-ups, again, if you see those in these areas, I didn't mark them on these waypoints, but if they're close to a point or close to a creek channel, go and flip those stick-ups. Those can be really good areas to fish. And you've got plenty of them here in this lake as well. So starting off, we're going to look at the ramps. So here we've got our old ramp here. And what I noticed was interesting about this lake, I've only fished it once. I typically focus more on the east side of DFW, but something must have happened with this lake. Like maybe it existed before and then they built a dam and made the lake a lot deeper or something like that, because there's a lot of old ramps and then they've been replaced by new ramps. The good news is when the water's up, these old ramps are actually under the water. So like in this case, if we're looking at this ramp off of this point, and I bring it up to 2015 or 2016. Let me go up here and move it up to a little bit higher. That was when the lake was flooded in 2015, so that's not fair. But if I move it up here to 2016 or to even 2017, you can tell that those ramps are way far out there, right? You got a ramp out here, you got a ramp out here. So all of this stuff is pretty far out into the water. So these look like great fishing spots. And the cool thing about it is they're all over the lake. Pretty much every one of these main marinas, or I don't know if these are state parks or what they are, but all of these areas pretty much have 2 different ramps. One's an old ramp that's pretty much out in the water somewhere, and then the other one's the new ramp that everybody can see. So these are probably going to be really good spots when you're out here fishing on this lake, and something that me, feeling really comfortable with fishing around rock, these are definitely areas that I would focus on, especially coming out to the lake for the first time, maybe not knowing it that well. Those would be definite hot spots for me. Really hard spots around a lot of dirt and mud and stuff like that. So got an additional ramp here. There's a drain back here that you can kind of see. It's hidden back in here. Let me move that image up, get you a little bit clearer image here for October of 2014. So You've got a little drain here. This is all underwater, so you've got a little ditch that comes through here and a little drain. Not sure if that would be good or not, but always a good area to look. And then as you're looking up here, you start to see a few different rock piles. So you kind of got a little rock pile here, nice little small one. And then here you start getting into more rocks. So I just marked this whole point as just rocks, because you're going to, once you come up here and you see that I've marked it as rock, you should visually be able to look around and say, oh, okay, there's rock all around me right off of this point. So we've got rock there, we've got a ramp here, and then again, here's that old boat ramp. Now this one's not as far off into the water as those other ones have been, but you've still got an old one that's not being used. So you've still got rocks around it, things like that, and it's probably going to have a ton of algae and stuff built up on it because it's not being used. So these are good areas to fish around. Additionally, you have more rock that's up along this bank line. It just pretty much continues to be kind of scattered throughout, but I marked the big areas of it. So you've got some rock here. And I don't know if this thing's still here, but that'd be interesting to fish around if it's still there. That might not be there. It might just been part of that marina. And then getting back in here, you just kind of get some flat spots. But like I talked about earlier, you know, with the stick ups, there's certain areas that you might want to look at. And, you know, if you find an area that has those stick ups, like let's say here, there were some stick ups that I just noticed off the edge of that point. So when we bring it up here to 2016, we should be able to see it. Actually, we can't. The water's up just a little bit too high. But there's some stick ups right in here. You could definitely flip. This is off this point. And this is pretty close to the edge of the point, but you can see some more of those right in here as well. So anyways, take a look at those. Make sure you're flipping around those, and also any buckbrush that you see. If you see any buckbrush, go up and flip around it and see if you can find anything in that area. All this green stuff right in here should be those stick ups that I'm talking to you about. All right, so we're going to keep on moving up. There was a little ditch back here, but it didn't look significant enough for me to mark it, so I just left it alone. But I did notice here you've got an old boat ramp, which actually has 4 different ramps on it. Some really good rock around it. Probably has some pretty decent drop in there. And then you've got some rocks here as well. I put ramp here, but I should have probably renamed that to rock. So I'll fix that one and we'll keep moving. So over here, I noticed there's a road bed. If you notice here, you can see the road going and then just kind of disappears. So there's some sort of a road bed that runs through here. And usually when you see that, you can just look up and follow it over here to this bank line and see if you see anything that may look like it could have been a possible road bed. It looks like right here is probably where it comes in at. So not sure where that road bed is in relation to being underneath all of this stuff, but there's definitely a road bed that comes through here somewhere. So take a look at that, down scan it, see if you can locate it. We've got a ramp back in here as well. And then another road bed back here. You can see it right here. It comes through these trees. They probably used to come right in here and probably turn a little bit right in here. Sometimes these can be golden spots, right? We talked about it for pre-spawn and post-spawn, but staging areas that they can set up on. Now, obviously, if they were going to spawn back in this cove, this would be a good area to focus on for when they're coming in and leaving, to see if you can catch them when they're doing that. But if there's a road bed here and it's got rock and structure on it, stuff like that, then that might be a really good area for them to set up on and to stage on. So take a look at these road beds, especially when they come across small coves like that. All right, so I'm going to keep on moving up. This marina is gigantic. That's crazy. We get over here. There's another ramp that's over here. A little bit of a pinch point here. I didn't really mark it, but you may want to fish just around these edges and see if there's anything along those edges. You've got a little bit of a riprap or rock back here, but it just didn't look like enough for me to make a mark for you guys. Here's the road bed that we talked about that was coming in through there. It also comes across this other side, so I'd imagine it's out in here as well. So if you've got imaging, if you have the ability to do imaging, definitely take a look and see if you can locate that road bed and fish around that road bed. That's going to be a good area to take a look at. And then moving on up here, actually before I do that, I just noticed this. You see these stick ups out here off this point and right here? These would probably be a good area, a good hot spot to really work that area. So take a look at that point and that area around that point. And then moving up here, we've got an old ramp that's kind of sticking out here. I don't know if these are ramps or old road beds. So if I'm going to kind of use them both loosely, because I'm just telling from a Google image, it looks like an old ramp, but it could also be an old road bed as well. So take a look at that. And then moving over here, obviously this bridge and everything's a lot different now, but moving over here, there's an old ramp that's buried as well. So take a look at that. And then we've got another one that's over in this area. So remember what I told you guys about earlier? I was like, it's really cool because you've got these ramps that are out here that are just a little bit offshore that are right beside like main public boat ramps. So that's really cool how this is set up. And you can see here the water's still down in this image in April of 2013, but yet that old ramp is under the water. So these are going to be great spots to look at. Definitely hot spots. Definitely spots I would go really pinpoint in on and probably try to get at that pattern to see if I could get on a pattern of just hitting these old ramps, because there are plenty of them to fish and they all look really, really good. So up here, moving on up, there's an old ramp that's kind of buried up here. You can barely see. So take a look at that one. And then moving on up here, I didn't see too much going on through that bank line, but there were some rocks right off of this point that you can see. So I really like that. I like how scattered they are. I would love to go up there if there was shaky heads and stuff like that in those rocks and see what you could find. Now back in here, it gets a little bit interesting. We've got really two different creek channels and a couple of different drains going on. So in this creek, basically this creek just comes back here from this neighborhood and comes in. So I just marked that creek channel. Now if we move that back, and look at it when the water's a little bit higher, let me see if I can get us back into a decent image here. That creek channel is not as noticeable. So this should really help you guys identify where that creek channel is at, and then, really how to fish it and where to fish around it. So sorry about my image here. It's not wanting to cooperate with me. So then I'm going to keep this moving up. You've got some good areas to flip around here. Remember I told you about the stick ups. If the stick ups are close to a creek channel or a point, well, guess what? They're really close to a creek channel right here. So fish around this area, around this creek channel. And then up here, you kind of got the same thing. You've got these stick ups that are out in here. You've got a nice creek channel, nice ledge coming, or not ledge, but a weed line that comes along the stick ups there. You've also got some drains that are out here that are typically underwater. The water's usually up in here somewhere. So all of these drains are underwater. You've got one here, you got another one here. And every time you see these drains, you also have a ditch pretty much that follows it out. So these are all good hot spots right by the creek channels. Another good drain back here. This one's not as much in the water as the other ones, but there are some back here. Other than that, really that cove doesn't look that juicy, but I would definitely look at this spot right in here to see if it had any fish in it. And then I would probably go fish those drains as well if this is the area of the lake that I was fishing. Now we move up here and the landscape changes just a little bit. We start seeing a little bit more rock. So didn't see too much back in this area, but there are some rocks off of this point, all three of these points. So take a look at those. You can see this if I zoom in here, you'll see what I'm talking about. And there's also another rock pile that's just right over here that you can see. So you definitely have a lot of different options that are over there. And then when I'm moving over here, I did kind of change up my waypoints. I'm trying to make this to where when we import them into the graphs, that it doesn't change the name. So I had to make the name a lot smaller. So for brushes, for brush piles or laydowns, I'm just going to put LD for laydowns, or maybe BP for brush piles, or I might just call it brush. So if you see LD, that would be a laydown. So I did mark a few different laydowns that were in here that I want you guys to take a look at. Let me move this back real quick and put it, see if we can get a little bit clearer image. We might not be able to. It doesn't look like we're going to be able to. Look like that's the best one we're going to be able to get. But we've got a lot of different laydowns that are right in here. So I would come up and flip around those laydowns, Texas rigs, things like that. I also wanted you guys to check this because it looks like a high spot. It's just off the bank that looks like it might have some cover in it. We've also got some additional laydowns that are back in here. You can see a really large one right here and another one back in here. Other than that, it's just kind of blah back in here, but you do have some rocks too that are around this point. So if you're fishing that area, maybe go fish those laydowns, check that little hump, and then come over here and fish that rock, and then maybe swing back down here. You got some decent things back in here. You've got some rock, additional rock point that's back in there, maybe a little creek channel there, but I didn't see enough to really mark it. And then back in here, this just kind of looked like a little bit of a hot mess, real shallow, not anything too significant from a creek channel standpoint. This looks like a creek channel, but it's actually what someone has cut out, because that's not the actual creek channel. I think the creek channel actually runs over here. So anyways, didn't see enough back in here to make me want to really mark anything in that area. So then coming up here though, I did see a really nice creek channel, and that's this one up here. So I went ahead and marked that. It goes underneath this bridge. Probably becomes really obvious when you get right around in this area, but when you're up in here, it's really difficult to tell where that creek channel is. So if you have the ability to have these marks, it's definitely going to help you. And then moving over here, we've got a ramp. So take a look at those ramps. We've talked about them a lot. They have those rocks around them. And here's an old either roadbed or a ramp. I couldn't tell. It almost looks like an old ramp because you've got the big area where they would probably be parking, and then you've got the 2 ramps here. So take a look at that ramp. That's right off of a main point. So it would definitely be a good place to check out. You've also got a little underwater hump out here with some cover on it. Got another one here, but this one looks really, really good. So take a look at that one. And then we're going to move up and we're going to get into some crazy creek channels going on here. This thing goes way back up in here. So I'm not sure if you can get a boat up in here, but it looks like you can. But I went ahead and marked the creek channel in the areas where it's not going to be as obvious to find it. So you can see here where it comes down, they kind of come together here, and then they go into the main creek channel. Now, if we move on down to this point, did mark a few other things that were in here. You do have this laydown that's right here. So I went ahead and marked that. Didn't see too much back there, but you got a lot of different laydowns that are along this bank line. So if that's the pattern that's working for the day, this would probably be the area that I would migrate to, because you've got a lot of different laydowns here. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 significant laydowns that I can tell just by looking at the navionics. And then here you've got the stick-ups along the point. If that pattern's working, and then we're going to keep on moving down. We've got another ramp that's down here. And then I'm going to scroll back out. We talked about checking that point. We're going to scroll over here, and we're going to look at this real quick. Now, I called this ledges, but obviously there aren't really ledges in, I shouldn't say Texas, but not in our area. There aren't like true ledges like what we'd have in Table Rock Lake where I grew up fishing. But there were some things here that looked like they had some significant depth changes. So I called them ledges. I assume that's what they're called. That's what we're going with, right? So here we've got some significant little ledges here right off of this point. So take a look at that. That looks very, very interesting. And I would definitely want to go fish that for sure. Back in here, just some shallow stuff, nothing really that I can mark. You got a little pond dam there, but not sure it's worth marking or not. But over here, off of the point that's just right across from that one, you do have some more rock, and you can see it here as well. So there's probably something similar to like that big rock where it created that ledge over here as well. So these could be 2 really good points to focus on. And then as we move over here on this point, we also have some shallower rock that's right here that you can see. So take a look at that. All 3 of those points would be good little points to take a look at, even right now in the springtime, because if they're spawned or if they're getting ready to spawn, they're going to stop at these areas as they're moving back into here. And those are all going to be great stopping spots. It just depends on if you get there at the right time when they're there. So then moving on down, didn't see too much along this bank line, but do take a look at this. It's off the shore just a little bit. Has some really good cover, so check it out. Flip around it, Texas rig around it, see if you can find anything. Got a couple more of those down here where these are just like these little offshore humps or little points. And then I'm going to move on back up here. I didn't see any significant creek channels or anything up in here, so I didn't mark anything, but there were a couple different ramps in here. And like we talked about earlier, almost every time I saw a major ramp, I saw that secondary ramp somewhere close by that was pretty much under the water. So here's the same thing. You've got the main ramps here, and then you've got the underwater ramps in this area. So if we move that back to 2015, actually that's when the lake was super flooded. 2016 will actually give us a better image here. You can see that, well, even here, the water's a little bit high because that ramp actually looks like it's all the way over, but look how deep this ramp is and how far out it is into the water. So these are all really good areas to take a look at. Make sure you focus on those. I can't stress it enough. Those look like really good hotspots. All right, so we've also got some rocks along this point, rocks along this edge too. And this one looked interesting because I couldn't tell if that was an old roadbed or an old ramp or just rocks. So I called it rocks, but you can see, and maybe my eyes are just messing with me, that almost looks like an old roadbed or just an old ramp. I couldn't tell. But anyways, mark that. And then down here, you've got some rocks along this edge. And then as we swing over, we've got some additional rocks out off of this point. So it was weird. This lake is interesting because, or even this cove, because you've got, that shallow, muddy stuff, where you're just kind of flipping the buck brush and the stick ups and stuff like that. And then you can switch over to the other side of the lake and you can actually get into like really big rocks and things like that. So a very interesting lake to fish for sure. So additional rocks up in here, went ahead and marked those for you guys. And then as we get around this point, the same thing, you got these rocks. Now these flatter rocks, or these bigger, chunkier rocks like this is kind of what we have a lot of in Missouri. And these are great for using Texas rigs and things like that, because you can throw your little Texas rig up there and just roll it off those shelves. And every time it drops from the shelf, you just kind of let it sit there. If you don't get a bite, you just pull it down to the next shelf. You just work your way down, and that is a very effective way to get bites. This looks like an area where you could actually do that on. So take a look at this point. It looks really, really good. We've also got some additional rock that's back in here. And this all looked like it was blocked off potentially, so I didn't see too much back in there anyways, but I didn't mark too much back there because I couldn't tell what was going on with all of those buoys. And then moving over in here, saw some additional rock off of here. This looks like it's got some really good drop-offs too, so I would definitely take a look at this whole area. Just looks really, really good. Got some additional rock out here off both of those points. Those points look excellent. And then coming over here, I'm sure this probably all looks different, but these rocks should still be here. So there's another good area of rocks right in here, another good stopping point. If they're coming in, they hang out here, they move over here, and then they bounce back in here and do their spawning thing. So always definitely a good area to look at when you find that. And then let's wrap this thing up. We're really close to getting to the end of it here. We've got some more riprap along the bridge. We got the additional ramp that's over here. Now again, I couldn't tell if this was a roadbed or a ramp, but definitely worth fishing. And then we've got an additional ramp that's right here. So this would be the newer ramp, the one that would be available today. And then there's that old ramp that I was telling you guys about that we see all the time. You see the same thing over here, another ramp, and then the old ramp that's not being used. That's probably a little bit, just a little bit offshore now. Got some rocks back in here as well. And then I just kind of marked different rocks that I saw back here. So you got a little bit of a pile of rocks that was right on this little point, a little bit here. Got a good laydown that's back in here that's probably totally submerged and underwater. And then over here, some additional rock that was off of this point. So if you pulled up on this, on this point and the water was up higher, you would have no idea that this point had any rock on it, but there's definitely some rock down there. So take a look at that. That could be a good point as well to fish. This one was a little bit scattered. I went ahead and marked the rock just because the rock looks like it's really large. And there could potentially be more larger rock right around this area that you just can't see because Google Earth, or basically Google Earth doesn't have the image when the lake was drawn down that much. So maybe take a look at that, but don't put a lot of focus on that because there's not a ton of rock there, but there were some really large rocks that were there. Now here we talked about if you find those stick-ups up off of a point or close to a creek channel, take a look at them. I went ahead and just marked this to make sure that I didn't forget, number one, to tell you guys about the stick-ups, but number two, because if I come out here to fish this lake, I'm definitely going to fish right around in here. So take a look around in this area. It's coming off of this point. It's got stick-ups. It's got good cover. It's got good access to deep water. All kinds of good stuff going on with that right there. And then back in here, not a lot going on in this bank line, but when you get back in here, you start getting into rocks again. So I've marked each one of those areas and just take a look at them, fish around them. Again, Texas rig and shaky head are probably going to be your best bet for getting into into those types of rock piles and things like that. Now I'm going to move on down here. We just got a couple more spots to look at. This is an old ramp that's here. So imagine it goes pretty far in here. It looks like it's got some pretty good depth to it. So take a look at that ramp. And then we've got, I believe, 5 more spots to look at, and we're done. So we're going to look at this here. Another ramp coming over here. This one's really buried in there. I bet that one's pretty deep. The water's usually, I think, right up in here. This is probably your main water line, so that is totally submerged under the water. And you've got another one that's over here. Big concrete area, and the water's going to be up a lot higher now. And then here's the newer ramp that's over here. So that pretty much wraps us up for zone 1. Actually, it doesn't. I lied to you. We've got one more ramp that's buried back in here, and then one more laydown that's right here that I did not see before. Try to wrap this thing up. So that wraps us up for zone 1 of Lake Lewisville. Make sure to tune in because tomorrow we're going to be diving into zone 2 for Lake Lewisville, and then the following day we'll dive into zone 3. We'll probably take a day break or so. And then we'll jump into the offshore spots with Navy Onyx to talk about those as well. That'll probably take a couple more videos. If you want these waypoints, we definitely have them out there. Simplisticfish.square.site. Make sure you pick up your card. Hey guys, I appreciate all the support. Tight lines to everyone. Hope you catch your PB this weekend. Take care.